What's up, everybody? CHM Carnivorous here. I hope you're having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Now, I'm outside today because I want to show you a very cool group of carnivorous plants called sundews. Now, these are my outdoor sundews. I also grow them indoors and also grow them in a greenhouse. And so I want to talk to you about what is probably the coolest, most enigmatic carnivorous plant out there and why they deserve a place in everybody's collection, including non-carnivorous plant collections. Everybody should own these plants, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. Now, the world of carnivorous plants is full of mystery and misnomers and, quite frankly, a lot of confusion. A lot of people think that they are out of their reach to being able to grow them and that they require some level of green thumb near expert, and that could not be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, most carnivorous plants are just as easy to grow as non-carnivorous plants, and particularly sundew is, in my opinion, far easier than most house plants. It does require a few specifics, but once you get those down, they grow like weeds. Now, a little bit about sundews is they grow all over the world. They're on every single continent besides Antarctica for obvious reasons. They are extremely prolific and are very good at adapting. Part of that adaptability is they have produced mucilage on their leaves, and you can see it there just a little bit. And that is where they get their dew and the sundew name. That mucilage is produced through proteins, through a photosynthesis, which we will get to in a minute as far as their light requirements. And so that mucilage is used to attract prey in, thinking that it is dew, where they get, or nectar rather, where they get snared in it. And depending on the plant, it will either activate and wrap around it, or it will slowly digest the insect and take the nutrients to get that ever needed nitrogen. Now, just like most bog carnivorous plants, these grow in nutrient poor soils, and because of that, they had to find a way to get nitrogen from their environment. And so what these remarkable plants have done is produce this mucilage that is utilized to help capture and digest their prey. Now, let's talk about that photosynthesis and light requirements for these things. So it's a perfect segue about that dew. Let's see if I've got another one I can show you. Now, they're all different types of sundews, but one thing is certain: they all require light. There are a few called the Three Sisters that don't necessarily need as much light, but for the most part, sundews need a lot of light. 16 hours of direct sunlight is what they prefer. They can certainly go higher than that. They can even potentially go lower than that. But if they do go lower, you're going to run the risk of them not producing that dew. So the right here is called the Cape sundew, a Drosera capensis. This is probably the easiest of all of them to grow, and the reason why this one I chose to show first is this is probably the one that everybody should start to grow in their collection. Other than the Venus flytrap and a little bit Drosera brahmanii and the Regia, these are one of the few that actually will close around their prey. Now, it's not as quick as a Venus flytrap, but let's say a larger, like a housefly, was to land on one of these leaves. Over a period of an hour or so, that leaf would start to curl around that fly, and that is to keep the prey close to the body and to get as much surface area as possible, and it will start to extract nutrients. Now, not all plants do that, all Drosera for that matter. This right here is called a filiformis. Now, it is short because it is winter, and it can't really decide, because we're in Florida, whether or not to go dormant. But normally these things would be very tall, but they do not curl around their prey. As you'll see here, the prey just sort of sits on there and doesn't go anywhere, but the plant is absorbing those nutrients all the less. And so it's very important that they get a lot of light. Without that light, they cannot produce that mucilage, and they cannot perform their carnivory. So 16 hours of direct light. A good way to tell is if they're not getting enough light is they will stop producing this mucilage. The other good thing is, let me see if I have one. 1 second. Here is a good example. See how red these are? Most sundews, not all of them, but most of them will turn red if they are given enough light, and they will certainly get much more red than this, but that's also a good indication. Most sundews that do not have enough light, A, don't have that mucilage, or B, they are not red. So those are two really good indicators. Now there is a variety called Alba that won't produce that, but for the most part, they're gonna have that red look. The Alba does not produce any of the red. Now let's talk about soil. As mentioned, these plants grow in a very nutrient poor soil, and so for that you're going to want to use peat moss and then a mixture of either blasting sand or perlite. Now you want to make sure there's any additives in there. You don't want it to have any additional like minerals or fertilizers in there. Most peat mosses won't, or perlite as well. Just make sure it's organic. And then you can also add some long fiber sphagnum moss in there as well to just help the mix. The aeration's not necessarily as important as a nepenthes would be. They do like having aeration on their soil and having the soil a little bit loose so they can extend their roots out. But they will, again, here's where it becomes user or beginner friendly. They will grow very well in a very wide contrast, if you will, of soils. You can have extremely loose, airy soil. You can have very dense. I've even grown them in 100% peat moss with no problems. They will find a way to, quote Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, nature will find a way. These plants, they like a very good sort of a peaty based soil. You can grow them in sphagnum moss. Some of them prefer it like an adelaide, but for the most part, for beginners, you want to grow them in a peat moss 50-50 with perlite. Now, let's talk about watering. Again, they're very, very user-friendly, beginner-friendly. They do like to have water, depending on the variety. This is a capensis, which you'll normally get. They can handle waterlogged conditions all the way down to almost dry conditions. For best growth, you want to keep about a third up the pot, or even up to a half of the pot for optimum growth. You want that water to be either rainwater, distilled water, and or reverse osmosis water. And this is very important. If you use a water that is high in mineral content, you won't notice a problem right away, but you will start noticing your plants start to wilt, and they will eventually die on you as those minerals build up. So if you put them outside, they'll take care of it themselves, especially you live in a rainy state like Florida, like I do. If not, just utilize some of those either reverse osmosis, rainwater as it's collected, and or distilled water. Now, if you're unsure about the parts per million of your water, you can get a TDS meter. In that TDS meter, you want to be below 50 parts per million. However, I've seen them do well up to 100 parts per million. So if you have soft water and you're able to test that, you may be able to use the water directly from your tap. As far as top watering, they don't really mind. I would probably try to keep it off of the leaves because you will wash that mucilage away. They'll produce more as long as they're getting enough light, but it will set them back without being able to catch their prey. And that's a perfect good segue going into the prey. What should you feed these plants? Now, if you're growing them outdoors, don't worry about it. They're going to catch everything they could possibly get, especially your bonatas or your, let me see if I can pull one out here. Here's a bonata, and if I could show right there, a little hard to see, but all those little black specks are bugs. They catch a ton of insects, and so do filiformis. If you grow them outside, they are going to get more than enough insects to help them out. If you do grow them inside, I use a fish flake and then I grind it up really fine. Because these plants don't have a lot of mechanisms of growth, as far as, movement rather, it's very important that you don't put too much food on them or too big of food on it, because it will create mold. Now, it certainly won't hurt your plant or kill your plant, but it just looks unsightly and it might slow them down or potentially kill that leaf. Which brings me to my next point. Carnivorous plants in general, but especially sundews, have a very high leaf turnover rate, and that is okay. That's natural. That's what they're supposed to do. So if I pull my capensis friend back out here, you'll notice that there are some dead leaves around there. They have a very high leaf turnover rate because it takes a lot of energy to create these leaves. And if those leaves have already caught prey, they're already injecting nitrogen into the leaf, and so that leaf has served its purpose, and so the plant is going to kill them off because it doesn't want to divert any more energy to that specific leaf. So a lot of the concerns I get on the Carnivorous Plant Health for Beginners group is that their plant looks like it's dying because the leaves are dying. And as long as those leaves are dying back near the base, it will continue to unfurl and new ones will come out almost like a palm tree, and it will grow up. Now, not all of them grow with that pattern. The filiformis here will just die the leaf back, and it will go all the way to the ground and then fall off, similar to this right here. Where's the camera? See? So it just looks like little brown hairs, if you will, or tiny, tiny roots. Those will die all the way off, perfectly fine. You can just go ahead and pluck them off or cut them off, and the plant will never know the difference. Now, let's talk about propagation, and this probably is the reason why they are so beginner friendly and why they are so much fun. All right, what I'm showing you right now is the flower of a Drosera capensis. This is the Montague Pass, so it's a large form, and it's actually got 2 flowers already, and it's got another one coming. And the reason why I wanted to show you that is because flowers on capensis and most Droseras are pretty unique in the flowering world. Here's another one on a filiformis that hasn't opened yet. They don't stay open for very long. They will open up in just a couple hours, they will close. Now, if you're growing a capensis, like the ones you can get at any sort of big box store, they are self-fertile, and so they're also known as a perfect flower. What that means is they have both a male and a female part, and as the flower opens and closes, it will self-pollinate. And what makes that so particularly cool is with the capensis here, you'll get anywhere from up to a couple hundred to even 1,000 or more seeds that have an 80% germination rate. That means that you get a lot of plants, a lot. And so these things will flower if fed properly and out in the good light. Could be outside, could be in a grow light. They will flower profusely all year round. And so you will have more seeds and pups than you wouldn't know what to do with. Now, not all of them are like that. This filiformis here happens to be fertile, but most filiformis and bonatas are not fertile, and so they will not self-pollinate. They're going to need a completely different plant, not a clone, but a completely different plant in order to have successful pollination. But that's okay, because there's other ways to propagate this that are equally, if not better, for growing your collection. And I'm referring to leaf cuttings. Leaf cuttings and or root cuttings, even flower stalk cuttings. All of these produce a ton of pups for you. And it's just like it sounds. I'll make another video, and I've done some in the past, but I'll make another video showing you how to take those cuttings. But simply put, take a clipping of the roots or of the stems of these plants, the leaves of these plants right here. You put them on a wet peat soil and keep them wet and keep them humid, whether in a bag or with a lid. And before you know it, you'll have 10, 20, 30 plants growing from that singular leaf. If it's a root cutting, it will grow probably 1 or 2 at most, but it'll be a very strong, very fast growing baby for you. That is one of the biggest reasons why I say people should grow these plants. It's not only because how easy they are, but it's also because of how easily they propagate. And so it is very easy to make an enormous collection for yourself very rapidly. So capensis, for instance, from seed to full grown if not fed, could only be as little as a year. If fed, it could be even sooner than that. And so there's not many plants out there, carnivorous or otherwise, that is going to grow that fast for you. And like I said, you can take their flower stalks and set it on the peat moss, take their roots, take their leaves. They will produce pups for you as long as taken care of. What more is there to say? Easy growing plant, for the most part pest free. Aphids do love the capensis, but they're easy to treat. I made a video about that. But for the most part, especially your filiformis, your bonatas, very easy. They are very forgiving. Capensis is extremely forgiving, and they don't require a lot of care. As a matter of fact, there's some of those plants that you can forget about, and they will still thrive and do amazing. Now, dormancy. This is where I ask anybody who's going to get into any type of plant that you do your research and understand what it's like for them in the wild. There are a lot of Drosera that require dormancy, and so it's important that you educate yourselves on those. For instance, this bonata normally would be twice, 3 times this size. It is in sort of a quasi-dormancy state. It may end up going dormant around February, but probably not, because we're having a very warm season here in Florida. Filiformis, some of them will, some of them won't. This one right here has gone completely dormant. As you can see, it's not dead. There's a little tiny hibernaculum, those little buds. And so that is dormant. And when it warms up, it will spring forth a ton of new growth. But some of them sort of stay in this stasis of halfway dormant, halfway not. Some of the Floridanas, the Florida Reds, the Florida All Red, they don't go dormant, or they can, but they usually don't. And so they'll sort of stay in that halfway point. Capensis does not need any dormancy whatsoever. And I've only scratched the surface. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of species of sundews out there, all the way from rosetted sundews to pygmy sundews that are the size of pennies and quarters and dimes, to very large sundews like the king sundew regia. So the sky's the limit, or magnifica. You can literally get into the hobby of growing sundews and just collect new ones for years and years and years, and they're still discovering more. So, in short, what is there to say about them? These plants are perfect for any grower, specifically for beginners. They will make you fall in love with carnivorous plants. In the mornings, when it's especially a foggy day and you come out and you look at a whole cluster of them, they glisten. I mean, it looks like diamonds. They are just covered in their own dew, and the dew from the humidity outdoors. It is such a beautiful sight to see. They flower profusely. A lot of them will self-pollinate, and those that don't, you can grow a collection extremely fast through cuttings. If you put them outside, they're going to essentially take care of themselves. You might have to top water them during the dry months, or put water in their base in the dry months. But for the most part, they are easy peasy. So I highly recommend that you grow them. If you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to ask. I am always here as a resource to help support you in your carnivorous plant journey. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.